I think it's one of the hardest things to do, where everyone in that chain of that organization, from the very top of the shareholders, the CEO, the executives, all the way down to the games teams themselves, they're all operating in an aligned value, an aligned vision. And that's so important because people get quickly jaded when they see that things aren't what they seem. How does that work? How do people actually accomplish that? Because I think the best organizations in the world, the ones that really run the test of time, have that really down to a T, where you join an organization and you know what you're doing and you know what you stand for and you know how your work translates. And yet the organizations that struggle don't have that, or just flounder that after a while.
So I would actually frame it a little differently. I think that the absence of that doesn't mean you're guaranteed to fail. But like so many other things, to have it is to stack the odds in your favor. And that's what you're trying to do over and over and over again. There are plenty of companies out there that didn't have what you just described, that didn't have this sort of, we're all moving in the same direction. This is who we are. This is what we want to become. This is the impact we're trying to have on the world. Let's run towards that. And yet they created a really resonant product. And that product got huge. And then they had to like figure it out as they went. And sometimes they did a horrible job of that. But they were printing money because they had this product and no one else produced a better product. And they just kept working on that product and trying to make it better and better and better. And you get into, innovator's dilemma, sustainer versus disruptive innovation and things like that. That can end up like taking those companies offline, and often does. But if you want to stack the odds in your favor, this is that thing of, hey, well, there are companies out there that haven't really had any formal leadership or good leadership or anything, and yet they've still succeeded. Why? Well, because everybody's got a shot. If you clunkily put together some app that everybody loves, or put together a game that wasn't what anybody was intending, but it happened to just land with players in just the right way, you can be a highly successful company and not have thought about any of this, and not have any of this figured out, and actually be doing a bunch. And by the way, interestingly, you'll have just learned all the wrong lessons, because you'll think like, oh, this is what success looks like, which is one of the reasons that Graham McAllister did more study on this. He's someone who thinks about vision and game dev. The chances of you succeeding are negatively impacted if you've just succeeded. And the speculation as to why is that you tend to think, well, the things we did were why we succeeded. But the problem is the equation is too complicated. And so you're going to try to replicate what came before, and that succeeded then to that audience in that context. But if you try to do that again, you're not likely to. In fact, the fact that you think you know the cookbook, like the recipe for how to succeed, is actually going to hurt you, because you're going to be a little bit stuck on why you succeeded last time, and it's going to impact you in a negative way in being able to adjust to the fact that this time is different.
So it's like those early startups. Sorry if I cut you off. It's like those early startups that, I think the point I was trying to make is that they're so aligned to grow the company, to get X amount of revenue, to hit this amount of installs or this amount of players playing live. And so when they're growing very quickly, everyone's super aligned to the goal. Everyone understands what they're doing. Everyone understands what it's about. People are working harder. People are communicating more because they want to hit that goal. And then when these companies kind of mature and maybe get bought by a larger company, and all of a sudden, well, I'm not really sure what we're trying to do. We're just trying to keep this game afloat. We're trying to grow it. Maybe it's a cash cow. That's slowly when the values start going away, because it's almost like we need that need to survive as humans. Like we all collectively come together to achieve this thing, which is like in startups, or like a young Riot Games, for instance, or a young Blizzard, everyone's just burning the midnight oil to get stuff to happen. And then once that kind of magic goes away, that's when the real need for leadership comes through, because the mistake is, well, when we were in our growth stage, we were killing it. And it was probably because of this leadership structure, or the way the CEO or the founder was running the company. It was like, well, no, you are achieving it because everyone was fighting to survive, to make this game the best it can be. And then once that fire's gone, then there's the mystery, or perhaps the void of what is it that we're exactly trying to do.
Well, and how do you continue to set a vision that is compelling for the people that work for you? And also, I know some people believe that some people are just better at the early stuff and not so good at the late stuff. And I'm part way there. I think it comes down to, can you create a compelling vision for someone at any size? And when you're small, it's much easier to create a compelling vision. And to your point, survival is on the line. This is how I get paid. I'm working really hard. If you're working for Microsoft, while you might get laid off, as has tragically happened recently in game dev multiple times, broadly, like, you're working a job, the company's stable, you're probably relatively stable, and you get to continue working. And so you show up, you do your thing. Survival doesn't feel like it's on the line. You feel like, hey, I'm going to keep getting a paycheck. And the fact that I work at Microsoft also looks good for if I were to go out into the world. So I feel somewhat secure in my career. And I don't have to, and actually perhaps shouldn't, because we're now in steady state. So burning the midnight oil over long periods of time like that is actually counterproductive. That's pretty well studied as well. So you're sitting there and you're going like, okay, what does it mean for me to be a steady state high performance operator? And the reality is most of those big organizations have very little ability to understand who is a high performer and who is not. They think they do, but the problem is they really don't know who their high performers are. And this leads to a problem of, okay, so I've got a bunch of people, some of them might be high performers, some of them not, and I'm not really sure who. I'm trying to figure out my performance management stuff and all this different stuff. And like you said, different set of problems emerge. These aren't fun problems. These aren't like exciting stuff, but this is a huge company employing a ton of people and hopefully bringing lots of value out there into the world. Like, you can say what you want about Jeff Bezos. Most people in the United States have bought something on Amazon and do so regularly. And AWS solved a huge problem in terms of cloud service provider. Other people are doing some of the same things in both spaces, but like, there's value that has been added into the ecosystem. And yet Amazon is now a giant, I can't remember. I looked up like how big it was. It's absolutely gigantic, the number of people in it. Do they have an aligned goal all the way up to the top that goes all the way down that organization? So you've got a couple of things you can do. One, you can try to keep your organization small. Great example of this in games, I think, is Valve. Kept itself fairly small. Also didn't have much of a top level vision from what I can see from the outside and from talking to some of the people who work there, other than, look, we're trying to, we have a set of values in terms of how we want to view players, but we're trying to make money via the context of gaming. And that could be platforms, that could be hardware, that could be games we make, but that's what we're doing. We're going to do those things. And there's a lot of self-organization, self-direction inside of that structure, and there's not that many of them. And so we have a lightweight, high-level goal. We're all able to point towards it, and then a lot of different stuff happens within that. And, some people have very high opinions of that culture, and some people have lower opinions of that culture, as you get anywhere, because not everybody's optimized to every culture. But if you're like a Riot and you decided, okay, we're going to go the scale route, well, now you're correct. Like, okay, what do we do when it is a steady state thing? How do we the entire company was so small when this game shipped, and now hundreds of people are involved in running each of the games that are successful out there, or at least League of Legends, right? And that size has shifted over time. Like, what are we doing with all these people? Well, they're working, they're doing steady work to create value for the players that still love to play that experience. And we're updating it, and we're making new champions, and we're, creating new modes, and we've got new skins coming out, and like all this different stuff. And can you make that exciting? And for some people, I think the answer might just be no. I want to go back to doing the thing where there were 5 of us in someone's basement, and we're all in it. And if it works, it works. And if it doesn't, well, we're all going to sacrifice things in the rest of our lives because this is meaningful to me. Sometimes you can have those people continue on in an organization. Oftentimes they'll leave because, again, the culture shifts, how leaders behave shift, all these different things. And I think you can continue to try to create compelling visions. And I think that's what often gets lost, is what would it look like to create something that was inspiring for the people who work here? To be fair, many companies put massive effort into this and aren't successful. And often that's because there's a difference between the explicit and the implicit culture of an organization. The explicit is what we say, yes, and the implicit is how we behave. And when you show up to an organization, you might know the explicit, and then you start realizing, like a simple example that I like to use is the open door policy of many leaders. Leaders have an open door policy. Great. So I can just anytime go in and talk to them when they've got their open door. Okay, great. So I go in and I say like, hey, I'm not sure we're doing this right. I'm not sure we're doing this right. I'm not sure we're doing this right. Everybody else knows somebody went and took advantage of the open door policy. What a wonderful thing we had. And then we discover later that that person didn't get promoted and got viewed negatively by the senior leadership of the organization because they brought up a bunch of things that no one wanted to hear about. And that leader, talked to everybody else about how they were kind of an idiot and didn't have good ideas. And so this person, by taking advantage of the open door policy, which was an explicit cultural thing, ended up hurting their own career and struggling from that point forward. Everybody saw that to some degree or another, because that's happening a lot over time. When I see that, I realize, got it. Open door policy. I'm not going to take advantage of that. I'm definitely not walking through that. So they can have that door open all day. I'm not walking into that until I'm ready to get fired. And that's actually where I've seen that at the extreme end. It's like, the time where I'm going to be honest with you is right before I leave.